going to continue talking about chaos. And today is the Chaos Dwarves. Chaos Dwarves are kind of a weird faction in that they never really got an army book in 8th edition. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, most of their existence is in secondary sources, like White Dwarf, or in this case, a larger narrative campaign book, I believe, called Tamarkan. I could be completely wrong. So, if you're a Chaos Dwarf player, or you just know more about them than I do, please feel free to link me some better sources. But today we are going to be reading through the lore that is available from the Chaos Dwarf army book within the Tamarkan publication. The history of the Chaos Dwarves, the Dawizar, or Uskul Darathzar, as they refer to themselves in their corrupted tongue, is an ancient and terrible one. It is a saga of a great and hardy people whose nobility would become warped into utter malice, and whose stubborn refusal to die would lead them down a dark and bitter path to damnation. Shadowed Past. The story of the Chaos Dwarves begins many thousands of years ago during the great expansion of the dwarf race northwards, long before the rise of man. The dwarfs, cleaving to those lands where metal and gems could be found and firm rock could be delved, principally followed the track of what is now known as the World's Edge Mountains. Here they excavated and expanded an underrealm of mighty subterranean fortress cities, linked by countless miles of mine workings and passageways. Eventually, this slow but steady expansion led one group of dwarves to the uplands in the far north of the World's Edge Mountains range. They came to know as the Zorn Uskul, or the Great Skull Land. A vast and inhospitable plateau where the air was frigid and thin, and the dusty ground littered with the wind-scoured bones of the ancient dead. The mineral wealth was rich here, but the earth and stone to some seemed tainted and unclean. Many dwarves called the place accursed and turned aside from it, either retreating to the most established holds, or, if of more adventurous character, choosing to strike out into far Norska or undertake the journey first east and south to the rich lodes recently discovered in the mountains of Morn. Some, however, refused to be balked, chose to remain in the Great Skull Land come what may. At first, these distant dwarf kindreds retained close ties of kinship and trade, but as the world darkened and foul things crawled from its depths to sunder the dwarf underrealm, contact between the far-flung dwarf holds became erratic and infrequent, as each looked to their own survival and defense. When the great time of chaos descended to sunder the world, these most forlorn of dwarf kingdoms were lost forever to their kinfolk in the World's Edge Mountains, and given up for dead as a tide of horror spilled across the land. The dwarfs of the West could not have been more mistaken, for the ravages of chaos did not destroy the hardy, determined dwarves of Zornozkul, but instead worked a dreadful change upon them. It is impossible to say with any certainty exactly when the dwarves of the East became the malevolent entities now known as the Chaos Dwarves, as the changes wrought to their bodies and spirits were slow and inexorable. Not even they themselves know the full saga of the dark times of their origins, save for that they were almost utterly destroyed, and it was only by their stubborn refusal to surrender in the face of unspeakable horror and death that they endured and came to know a new patron god, Hashut, father of darkness. Slowly they began to increase again in number and restore themselves in power and dark majesty, now barely recognizable from what they had been before. The dwarf race is unusually resilient to the warping influence of chaos, a reflection of natural dwarf stubbornness, perhaps. Nonetheless, the dwarves who live in the shadow of the mountains of Morn have changed slowly but inexorably over time, and become twisted in both body and mind. Though they superficially resemble other dwarves, in all important respects they are easily distinguished. Chaos Dwarfs often possess protruding tusks that lend them a brutal, savage expression, and they are commonly gray-fleshed and red of eye. Many have small horns that jut from their forehead, and some even have cloven hooves, and worse. Although such extreme mutations are rare amongst ordinary Chaos Dwarves, and common only amongst sorcerers, and those who have the most direct contact with the stuff of chaos. If the influence of chaos has worked terrifying changes upon the bodies of the Chaos Dwarves, this is as nothing compared to the transmutation of their hardy dwarf minds. The traditional dwarf values of stubborn determination, craftsmanship, and industry have been twisted into a perverted mockery in the hearts of the Chaos Dwarves. They become pitiless, macabre, and cold-hearted creatures, devoid of mercy and consumed by a need to enslave and dominate everyone and everything they came into contact with. And from this need grew their empire. Year upon year, decade upon decade, and then century upon century, with malevolent intent and monstrous patience, the dominion of the Chaos Dwarves has slowly grown. Down the centuries, their culture became as corrupted as their minds at every level, from their language and runecraft to the structure of their clans and their worship, all tainted by chaos and poisoned by malice. But they are still uniquely dwarven in many respects. Oath and loyalty, grudge and kinship stand as solid as iron, but mercy and weakness are intolerable flaws to be contemptuously destroyed. Not for them. The howling anarchy, slaughter, and ravening madness of Chaos's human followers, the unthinking savagery of the beastmen, or even the desperate, labyrinthine intrigues and vicious aggression of the Skaven. Instead, they are consumed with grim, cold cruelty, greed, and calculated brutality. The Father of Darkness. The god of the Chaos Dwarves is Ashut, the Father of Darkness, a grim and malignant being, often represented as a great blazing bull, wreathed in smoke and shadow. Ashut is a chaos god, although some sorcerers of the arcane would label him as an archdemon rather than a dark god, while others insist it is some other form of foul entity let loose upon the world during the time of chaos. Ashut is closely associated with tyranny, greed, fire, and hatred, and it is a being whose gifts of power come at a terrible price. As with much of their origins, just how the dwarves of the East came to seal their pact with Ashut remains shrouded in the dark times of the great sundering of the world by chaos. And in truth, the Chaos Dwarves themselves may only have a dim and warped understanding of how they became bound up with their nightmarish god. The twisted runic cartouches that adorn their fire temples do, however, speak of the abandonment of the dwarfs by the Zorn, of the dwarfs of Zorn Uzkul by their ancestor gods during the Great Cataclysm, their finding of salvation and succor with their new god, and the thirst of Ashut for sacrifice and subjugation in return for his patronage. Over the centuries, in return for flesh and blood, homage, and devotion, Ashut has gifted the Chaos Dwarves with malign secrets and powerful sorcery that fused with their mastery of industry and forgecraft to create many demon-fused machineries and monstrous engines of war, dominion over the fires of the earth and arcane and malevolent lore that has brutalized their sanity and souls. The pact between the Chaos Dwarves and their dark gods has only deepened over time, and grown to the point where the tendrils of Ashut's malevolence and the Chaos Dwarves' own bitter souls have become as one. An empire of smoke, blood, and ash. Chaos Dwarves are irredeemably evil, bitter, and and self-centered creatures, caring nothing for the life of others and directing all their labors to the construction of their great city, Mingulzar Nagrund, the city of fire and desolation, and the slow expansion of their power and influence in the world. To this end, Chaos Dwarf armies scour the dark lands and the deadly realms beyond, for slaves to fill their city and labor deep beneath the earth in the pits that surround it, and to provide sacrifices for the furnace fires dedicated to their dark god Ashut. Their empire has come to encompass the fire-scorched volcanic plain of Zarduk, at the heart of which Zarnagrund sits, and like a black iceberg, its true extent lies not above with its armored ziggurats and fire-lanced temples, but below the surface in countless miles of magma-lit delvings, cavernous chambers and vaulted mines, which resound to the cries of tortured slaves and the ringing of hammers in an untold number of diabolic forges. For many miles around it, the plain of Zar has succumbed to the hand of the Chaos Dwarves. It is littered with the scars of vast open mines, fiery rivers of magma, ash dunes, and stagnant pools of foaming yellow and blood red. Noxious with toxic spoil and fortified workings and watchposts, which line the great machine-crushed roads upon which countless slaves haul ore and plunder to feed the ever-hungry city of the Chaos Dwarves. Beyond this, their heartland in the plain of Zar, they have raised great fortress citadels and towers to establish their dominion throughout the far-flung and perilous Darklands. Although no force, even one as brutal as the Chaos Dwarves, can lay claim to true sovereignty over this vast realm of accursed, monster-infested, shifting ash deserts. At the edges of the Darkland, the outposts and black iron watchtowers of the Chaos Dwarves extend as far as the great desolation of Asgore and the coastline of the Sea of Dread to the south, and High Pass to the north, while Uzkulak, the place of the skull, seat of the ancient dwarf old before the time of chaos, is still populated, but is a strange, secretive place, and the bustling workings of its slave port and anchorage hide an ancient inner city that is little more than a heavily garrisoned tomb. The forbidden lower levels of Uzkulak are shunned even by its masters, and to be consigned to its depths is a punishment reserved for oath-breakers and blasphemers, as the worst fate a Chaos Dwarf can bestow. A fact which, given the malevolent inventiveness of the demon-smiths in such matters, speaks much to the horrors which must abide there. The plans of the Chaos Dwarves are the result of the intricate workings of their malign intelligence, deep paranoia, and cold cruelty. They see no need to ravage the world in fury in a desperate bid to crush all before them, only to fall overextended and spent, as so many throngs of human marauders and hosts of green-skinned savages have done in the past. Instead, they hoard their might slowly and rip from the Darklands the material wealth it contains in abundance. They venture forth foremost to harvest slaves, but also to punish those that would oppose them directly, and sunder any creature or force that might wax powerful in the Darklands before it can become a threat. More rarely do they travel further afield, mounting expeditions into distant lands in search of strange plunder, whose worth they have seen in the fires of Ashut's altars, avenge some slight, or merely to callously test their weapons against the powers of the world. As a result of this policy, to many the Chaos Dwarves are at best a dark legend, until, that is, they have the misfortune to encounter the dreadful truth for themselves. The dominion of the Chaos Dwarves, excuse me, is a slowly expanding power, which has with grinding, calculating savagery carved itself a realm from one of the most deadly lands conceivable, and its masters' dreams of conquest are things of brooding hatred and bitter perseverance. They are content to see their plans unfold over the course of centuries, perhaps even millennia, until one day all of the world lies a blasted plain in which the Chaos Dwarves stand unopposed and alone, save for their cowering slaves and the ashen bones of the dead. Slavery and slaughter. Even though their numbers have shown a slow but steady increase down the long centuries in which they have carved their empire from the Dark Lands, the Chaos Dwarfs are still few, and are far outnumbered in their realm by those over who they claim dominion by virtue of might and cruelty. Their slaves. The Chaos Dwarfs consider all life other than that of their own kind to have value only as raw resource and fitting sacrifice, and to them the muscle and sinew and even the souls of those that bow and scrape at the gesture of their iron-shod hands and cringe before the stroke of their steel-barbed whips are no more than a commodity to be amassed, exploited, and spent. Without slaves, Zarnagrund would not have been built, and its vast industries could not be maintained. And even now the need for fresh blood and labor only increases with each passing year, and the desolate empire always hungers for more. If the Chaos Dwarfs' grand and sepulchral plans bow to any pressure for speed in their execution, it is this increasing need for fresh slaves that is the cause. Should the levels of livestock falter through disaster or overuse, and are required at the commissioning of any grand new design, the Chaos Dwarf war host is gathered, and a suitable target is selected for despoil, while simultaneously iron-masked emissaries go out to the tribes of dark-hearted men, ogres, and even orcs to barter razored steel for lives. This, in turn, can trigger fresh assaults and ravages far beyond the Dark Lands to meet the Chaos Dwarves' tally, and captives taken in distant lands can eventually find their lives' end, trudging in the slave pits of Zarduk, or slaughtered upon its burning altars. Unfortunate wretches of many races toil amid the poisoned air and burning ash of Zarduk, and like the craftsmen they are, the Chaos Dwarves prefer, when possible, to select the right tool for the right job, from mutilated elves flayed and bled to provide alchemical unguents. I've never heard that word before. To fettered and broken chaos beasts from the northern wastes, harnessed for their immense strength and tolerance for injury. By far the most common slaves in the Chaos Dwarf realm are orcs and goblins, and this is not simply because they are native to the Darklands and its bordering mountains, but also because they are hardy creatures who will often last the longest in the noxious fumes and murderous conditions under which they are made to labor. Of these, the hobgoblins have a unique and favored place, as much as a slave might be favored by such a cruel and callous master. Perhaps the most distrusted, vicious, and above all treacherous of goblin kind, the Chaos Dwarves seldom reduce the hobgoblins to base toil, but rather employ them as slave overseers, lackeys, and even as troops, providing utterly disposable reinforcements for their own forces, enabling a larger enemy army to be weakened without cost in Chaos Dwarf lives before they themselves move in for the kill. Hated by the other greenskins who would happily murder them if they could, the hobgoblins of the Darklands have come to rely on the Chaos Dwarves for patronage and protection. While they are so treacherously eager to betray each other for advancement, they are quite incapable of fomenting any cohesive rebellion against their brutal masters, as they cannot even trust each other, making them in some ways the perfect slaves. Humans, too, have their place among the slaves of the Chaos Dwarves, as they are adaptable and quick-witted, if though less durable than greenskins, and considerably more unpredictable. As do ogres, who are valued for their raw power, but always present a danger as their primitive, violent spirits can never be fully broken. Skaven are never taken alive, unless to be worked almost immediately to death, or used as paltry mass sacrifices, as they are simply too devious, and the Chaos Dwarves have learned from bitter experience that any group taken might well conceal untold spies, saboteurs, and even deliberately infected plague carriers placed in their midst. But of all the races to fall into the hands of the masters of Zarnagrund, the darkest fate awaits their kin, the dwarves of the West. The fruits of the bitter malice of long brooding millennia are reserved for the Dari, and of all sacrifices to Ashut, none are more favored than those loyal to the treacherous ancestor gods. The Forges of Hell. Chaos Dwarfs are master craftsmen, and their armories produce an endless stream of armor and weapons, dark devices, and works of demon-fused occult engineering. Much of this war gear, the lesser product of their craft, blades and steel whose quality still outmatches any mere human craftsmanship, is traded northwards to the warring chaos-touched tribes, and eastward to the ogre kingdoms in return for slaves, for which the Chaos Dwarves have an unending demand, rare metals and gems, and to slake whatever strange desires the sorcerer prophet's experiments might require. By this trade, blood is spilled across the world by their weapons, and in doing so the Chaos Dwarves both enrich themselves and sow destruction in Ashut's name, and, moreover, they spread their insidious influence further, gather intelligence in regards to their enemies, and so bring their dreams of dominion closer, one drop of shed blood at a time. The greater works of their hell forges and the spawn of the dark intellect of their sorcerers, however, they guard jealously for themselves, and it is on the bedrock of these malevolent engines, savage weapons, and brutal sorcery that the Chaos Dwarf's true power is founded. Chaos Dwarf warriors are themselves equipped to the highest standard, and every sorcerer lord arms and outfits these soldiers to their own design, and in their own distinctive livery. The majority of their troops are armed with masterfully crafted axes, vicious stabbing blades, and barbed war picks, and protected by heavy scale corselets of rune-hardened iron or bronze, tall helmets, and heavy metal-clad shields. The most potent wear so-called black shard armor, forged with hellfire and blood, stronger than mere steel and phenomenally resistant to the effects of fire and heat. A significant number of troops are armed with firearms, from intricate wheel-lock pistols to the heavy, bladed, fire-glaive repeating guns. But the hail-shot blunderbuss, a powerful short-range weapon whose murderous fire is amplified when used in ranked fusillade, is the most common and iconic. This last weapon was developed to combat the near-limitless orc and goblin hordes that abound in the lands around the Chaos Dwarfs' domain, and has become the terror of the greenskins in battle, able to blunt even their crushing charges, and slaughter scores of howling goblins in a single thunderous blast from the warriors' ranks. It is, though, for their war machines that the Chaos Dwarves have become most infamous and dreaded on the battlefield. Unfettered by the usual dwarf reliance on tradition and resistance to change, they have combined their intellect and sophisticated understanding of steam power and mechanism with the hellish lore of Ashut to produce a nightmarish array of weapons. These range from cannons that fire burning gouts of magma, to steam-driven reapers, to fortress-shattering mortars and colossal siege engines of glittering brass. The most terrible of these war machines are bound with the hungering demons in their fabric, granting them both an unholy semblance of life and unmatched killing power. The might and bloodlust of these hell-forged artifacts cannot be denied, and they are perilous even to their masters should their occult bindings shake loose. As a result of their unpredictability and the difficulty of their construction, hell-bound war engines are used and fashioned more sparingly than more conventional, although no less deadly, designs in the Chaos Dwarf arsenal. Such weapons are often tested in battle by a pact of alliance with the Chaos Warriors of the North, so long as it serves the Drathzar's purpose. And it is not uncommon to see small contingents of dreaded Chaos Dwarf war machines amid the ranks of the war bands and hordes of the Chaos Wastes, lending them their immense destructive power. The Black Orcs. Certain arcane lore and blasphemous histories state apocryphally that many centuries ago, the dark arts of the Chaos Dwarf sorcerers sought to create a new breed of slave by means of blood magic and infernal power. They already, of course, possessed tens of thousands of orc and goblin slaves, but at best they were unruly, fractious, and inefficient, lacking the useful intelligence of humans or the sheer stamina of ogres. The new breed were to be powerful warriors in battle and able workers in the most hostile parts of their benighted realm. Inferior to their masters and obedient to their will, but superior in every regard from the common orc stock from which they were created. The great experiment worked at first, but the Chaos Dwarves soon... I'm sorry, this PDF is a little janky. Soon came to realize that their new orc breed, dark-hued and bulking, were both far tougher and stronger than their slave stock, were also far too independently minded to make good slaves. Indeed, their steadiness of will and brutal clarity of purpose compared to common orcs was itself a dire cause for concern, and not long after their numbers swelled and spread, these black orcs began to revolt and even organize other greenskins into obeying their will rather than that of their Chaos Dwarf masters. Some believed that in refining the Black Orcs, the Chaos Dwarves had also unwittingly concentrated the orcs' own bellicose nature and love of battle to untamable heights, while some suggest that something of the arrogant desire to dominate and destroy that festered in the hearts of the Chaos Dwarves themselves had somehow transferred and taken root in their progeny. In any case, the Chaos Dwarves were soon troubled by revolt after revolt, and were beset on all sides by a powerful and deadly enemy of their own creation. In the greatest and final revolt, near civil war broke out. The Chaos Dwarves were besieged with their own weapons, and Tsar Nagarund itself became a battleground. The Drothsar... I can't read that word. The Drothsar hovered on the precipice of destruction, until aided by the perfidious treachery of the hobgoblins against their kin, the Black Orcs were finally defeated and cast out and driven from the Chaos Dwarf Empire at great cost. The experiment has never been repeated. The Black Fortress. Guardian of the southeastern reaches of the Chaos Dwarf realm, the Black Fortress is a vast, jagged citadel stained black by the volcanic fires of the rocky plateau on which it sits. Along with the Tower of Gorgoth, it vies for prominence and power as the second most important fortress citadel of the Chaos Dwarves beyond their heartland on the Zarduk Plain. But while the Tower of Gorgoth exists to stand watch over a slew of deep mines and caverns, the purpose of the Black Fortress is as a purely military outpost, and its headquarters of the Legion of Asgore. The Legion is a mighty standing army which ranges across the desolation of the southern Darklands, escorts the far-flung slave caravans through the howling wastes, and stands as a bulwark against frequent invasions of ogres, orcs, and worse from the east. Even among their own kind, the warriors of the Black Fortress are renowned for their brutality and warlike nature. And far removed as it is from Tsar Nagrund and the favor of the Great Temple, it is often a place of internal exile for those who have suffered in the savage politics of the Empire. The hellish caverns deep beneath the Black Fortress are also home to the Infernal Guard, a cult of disgraced warriors enslaved to the master of the Black Fortress, who must redeem themselves in the eyes of Ashut and the Drothsar, or die in the attempt. For many centuries, the lord of the Black Fortress and commander of the Legion has been the sorcerer-prophet Drazoth the Ashen, a bitter rival of Lord Astragoth, feared and respected in equal measure by the Chaos Dwarves, bound to his service as a ruthless general and powerful wielder of Ashut's sacred flame. And that is the end of the lore segment of this book. not supposed to play this as its own army. There's a little disclaimer that says Chaos Dwarfs can be used by incorporating their units into your existing Warriors of Chaos army, or by using them as contingent forces in a Chaos Great Host army, or as allies in a grand battle. So I guess they want you to not play them as their own army, and looking through the profiles, I can see why. They have one unit of infantry, like melee infantry. One type of, I guess they're cavalry, they're war beasts. One type of ranged unit, and then a couple of war machines. And then of course the forge demon, or whatever it's called, the big guy. Interesting. So I guess this is really just designed to give Chaos armies a way to take artillery, pretty much. Weird. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.